Hey everybody, welcome to the Cosmic Dispatch. I'm your host, Cory, and we're going to talk about Virgo season today. Virgo season is different than what we've been experiencing during Leo season and Cancer season. So the first 2 months of summer, it's its own thing. And Virgo season contains the beginning of eclipse season, and also a new workshop that I am teaching with my friend here, Shea, in the Catskills, and it's called Getting Through It. I know that sounds very dramatic, but like I as far as I know, everyone, just about everyone I know is needing some help getting through something. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But before we get into that, and before we start like really doing a deep dive into Virgo, I would like my friend Shay to introduce herself.
Thanks, Cory. I'm Shea. I'm a queer artist and tarotist living in Phoenicia, New York. And I work with people one-on-one and in online classes and group study and in other ways, um, working with the tarot. And my work is largely influenced by a decade spent at a Zen Buddhist monastery and the organizing work that I do with showing up for racial justice. And I am so excited to get into this conversation with you. And when you were introducing getting through it, I was thinking to myself, like getting through this astrology. So I can't wait for you to like break it down for us.
Yeah, we're recording this during the last days of Leo season. And oh, it's my mom. Sorry about that. Um, like right when I said last days of Leo season. Anyway, last days of Leo season, which are just tumultuous as fuck. There's just no other way. I mean, there's a lot of other ways to describe it, but that would take a very long time. But yeah, the last days of Leo season are something else. And one of like there are like 10 major things going on with the astrology right now, but one of the big ones is this Jupiter Saturn square that perfects on, I believe, August 21st, 2021, which is also the same day as a really wild full moon. Um, and the Jupiter Saturn square is so important because it's it's the first major hard aspect that Jupiter and Saturn have made since their conjunction in December of 2020. When Jupiter and Saturn come together in a conjunction, it's kind of it's a reset for all of the structures in our lives. Both Saturn and Jupiter represent systems and structures and how we as individuals organize ourselves. And so back in December of 2020, they made a conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius. And that also that ushers in a 20-year cycle of Jupiter and Saturn conducting themselves in air signs after 20 years of conducting themselves in earth signs. So air is very different from earth. Air is a lot more movable, changeable. It's not concrete. And so that's something we're getting used to. So one way to then try to figure out, well, what does this Jupiter Saturn square mean, is let's look back at what was going on in December of 2020, either personally or in the world. What were the new things being, brought into our lives and conversations? What were the new ways we were trying to figure out how to organize ourselves? Whatever started then is meeting its first challenges now. And that, like first quarter square, which is what's happening, um, is often thought of as a crisis of action. It's like we come up against something and then it's like, oh shit, this doesn't work, or this needs fixing, or this needs rearranging. What are we going to do? It's a crisis of action. And so if you are coming upon these types of things in your lives as individuals, I know I am. I'm in a major like, oh, I have to reconfigure this. I have to restructure this. I thought things were organized this way. I think I have to organize them this way. What am I going to do? Then you're right on time for that. And what makes this especially poignant is when they made that conjunction in December of 2020, it was at 0 degrees Aquarius. There's a lot going on at 0 degrees Aquarius right now, and there has been for the past year, because that's where Pluto is right now, and that's another major shift. We're going through so many major landscape changing shifts right now, which is why if you've been feeling like just completely destabilized, again, you're right on time. Like there's nothing wrong with you. We Things are not stable. They are chaotic, which is what happens when when in the middle of change. We don't go from one neat organized way of being and then get to bypass this like crazy time when everything's coming apart and go straight to another organized way of being. This place that we're in right now, where everything seems really chaotic and things are opening up and shutting down and things are getting tossed around, that's our opportunity to get in there and make some changes before things solidify again. Because once they solidify, then that's what we're dealing with for, whatever the next cycle is. So instead of hiding under the bed, this is actually a time to try to figure out how to maybe even enter the fray and move some things around, per your own capacity, of course, but think about change. So we are in those last days of Leo season. But yeah, because we were talking before I hit the record button, because things are just really crazy right now. But before I go on to some of my housekeeping points, Shay, do you have anything to plug for fall or next month?
Can I just make a quick comment about something that you just said?
Please.
When you were talking about a crisis of action, how this is the first challenge confronted by something that was planted. I was just thinking about, Biden had just been elected. And I think that people thought, like, dodged a bullet, like, okay, we're good. And here we are experiencing our first crisis of action. Just the absolute ineffectual nature of the vote when it comes to like large scale change and so anyway, I thought that was fascinating, and I just really love your framing of this time, which feels so uncomfortable, as a chance to make changes before things solidify. I wrote that down. I just feel like that's such a thing to keep in mind. So anyway, thank you for that. um I think the only thing I want to mention about my work is I'm planning on starting a new study tarot series in December. And that is a monthly study group that meets twice a month over Zoom. We go through the arcana constellation by constellation. So in numerological groupings, every month I have a ton of materials that I give people. And basically we just sit around and like make meaning and tell stories and like pull spreads together. It's really fun. And then other than that is what we're going to talk about, getting through it together. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm going to do some housekeeping, and I always feel weird when I come up to this point, because I feel, because of like YouTube society, that I'm supposed to say, Don't forget to like and subscribe. But I have no intention of being any kind of influencer. When I was doing this as a radio show, and I did it as a radio show for 2 years, it was mostly like my students and clients would listen. And because they were listening when they would come to class or when we had sessions, the questions they were asking were so much better, and their facility with the astrological language was so much better that when we were working together, like our sessions were better. And so when I stopped doing the radio show, it's like I gotta still do something. And so I'm trying to keep to once a month. But if you're not a student of mine or a client, and you do like this content, that would be a great way to keep up with whenever I send one of these things out. So yeah, like and subscribe. Um, I'm I'm back in Kingston. I was traveling for a while, and that was really good. It was good for me to get out, but I'm happy to be back. Um, I'm excited for fall, and especially Virgo season. Like I was saying earlier, it's a very different character than the beginning and middle of summer, which, July and August were, again, like it's just so chaotic. So many things got like thrown in the blender, so many things coming at us from all directions. And like that, some of that does continue, but there's a big tonal shift that we're going to talk about. So I'm excited about that, and also just hoping it gets any amount cooler. um let's see, what else. My astrology books are closed until October or maybe November because I got a lot going on in the fall. I'm excited to start rehearsals for a performance project in September through Brooklyn Arts Exchange, and that culminates in performances in New York City in February of next year. And I'm also working with dancers and neurologists at Penn Medical Center in Philly and this fall, designing movement protocols for patients with neurological conditions. We did a pilot program earlier this year, and it was amazing. And we got funding to do it again this fall. And I'm super excited about both projects. When I was living in New York City, I did a lot of this neurological work with somatics and movement at NYU. And so I'm mentioning it now because I want to throw it open that anybody is welcome to contact me. Just shoot me an email if you have questions about ways to deal with mobility and sensory issues that result from things like Parkinson's, MS, stroke, dysautonomia, long COVID, Guillain-Barré, or any other type of brain injury. There are modalities that practitioners are using that aren't widely disseminated from the medical, the Western medical world. There are a lot of helpful practices that just aren't mainstream knowledge. So if you or anyone you know is dealing with some of these brain injury issues, neurological issues, email me because I'm also now steeped in it. I'm doing a lot of this kind of work. And I also have 3 weekly Zoom movement cohorts starting up next week. I have 2 somatic movement classes and 1 somatic strength class. It's a strength training class, but it privileges the nervous system, and it acknowledges the the nervous system's response to resistance and weight bearing. So, we're going to be building muscle and strength, but the mechanical part of it, that's like half of the work, I think. And so if you're interested in any of that, just email me or go through my website to register for those. And last but not least, Shea and I are collaborating on a workshop that starts on September 15th called Getting Through It. So Shea, would you like to start us off on like what this whole, it's kind of a symphony of things, right?
Symphony. May it be so. I really hope so. Yeah, so you and I feel like have been knowing that we were going to collaborate about something since we first had our first conversation. And it felt like things came together, the stars aligned, so on and so forth. And as we were sort of deciding can I just be transparent about our process? Is that okay?
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was basically like, we had thought about doing some things about the decans, and we may do that at some point. In fact, I feel certain that we're going to. But when we were you were bringing up how like eclipse season was coming, and I was sort of knee deep in my organizing work and thinking about the election. And eventually we just sort of landed on like, what do we need? Like, what do we need? And we came up with this offering. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to read the first couple paragraphs of the write up so people can get a sense, and then we can get into it. So
Okay.
the whole title, it's a big, getting through it together, the living language of divination in these times. And so for centuries, people outside the mainstream have used astrology and tarot for support during hard times. As we continue living through ongoing pandemic, genocide, climate crisis, and the crumbling of our institutions, it is becoming clearer than ever that no one is coming to save us. How can we find support and community in these times? So that's where you and I come in. We're creating a container to gather, reflect, create, and support each other through eclipse and election season. And so within this container, the idea is that Cory's going to sort of guide us through the current transits that are happening, and that we'll also be consulting the oracle using the tarot to help us understand what is the current quality of time. And then, in a very Virgo fashion, we'll take that information, that data that we generate together, and in the second half of each session, we'll spend time kind of creating medicine to support ourselves. And that sort of medicine can take the form of creative practice, body and breath practices, liturgy, spell casting, all manner of things. And so the point of this group, and it starts in mid September and ends the week after the presidential election in the United States. We'll meet 6 times during that stretch of time for 2 hours over Zoom. And that really gives us a nice, spacious container to both generate data and information and make meaning of it, and then actually um, create something together that when we leave each session, we're have a resource or a practice that we can sort of draw on. And it's also the gathering itself that is the biggest part of the support, is being together with other people who want to, do meaning making and intuitive work and divination work together. So yeah, I'm curious what all you want to add to that.
That was so thorough and so beautiful. I want to add that anybody, anybody who is interested, there's not like a barrier to entry where you have to know X amount of astrology or tarot or have an art practice or anything like that. It's people who are interested in gathering and learning something new, and practicing their meaning making skills through things like invention and creativity, which I think are really important during these times, right? When we have the opportunity to change a lot of things, but also there's a groundedness where we're using ancient techniques and traditions. These things come from somewhere. So it's, I have to be careful with my words here. I'm feeling like the Virgo coming in. I want to be like super judgy and say things like, there's no bypassing here, where this is not a place to come and like feel good. And it's not a place to come and bitch either. It's a place to be constructive
Mm.
and try to see as much as possible and hold that there are some really incredibly difficult things going on, and also hold that there are so many opportunities for really awesome, beautiful, even magical things. But to not, and this is where I have to get a little judgy. And I think one of the reasons why I wanted to do this space with you, I feel like in a lot of spiritual communities, there's a lot on offer to gather and have positive vibes, right? Like, like I do not see that as being helpful. I like I want people I want people to come together and help each other, like when you have a group of people, it's easier to confront things that are difficult and work through them. Um, and to look at, the times we're in right now and pretend that they're not difficult. And I'm sure they're easier for some people, but is just a total denial of what is. And so there's some rigor, but I also think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think it's going to provide comfort, but not in that infantilizing way, like in a respectful way that respects the inherent genius and intelligence that we all have. And so I get very passionate about it because I see a lot of these groups, and it really makes me want to gag. But anyway, I'm being
I appreciate it so much. I mean, I feel like this is why we put pandemic, genocide, climate crisis, and crumbling of our institutions in the first paragraph. Like, if we're not meeting there, this might not be for you. And like,
yeah,
goddess bless, but like, we're meeting on the ground of reality. It's
yes,
like if spiritual practice is not addressing the source of your suffering and you don't understand yet the source of your suffering is genocidal colonial white supremacy and capitalism, like, I mean, let's, like, we have, if your spiritual practice or community or teacher is not talking about fascism, they are not talking about your life and reality. Just saying. But we're also going to have I mean, like, you meet on reality so that you can then go and like, I love being constructive. Like, what can we make? What can we gather together? How can we relate and connect and communicate and resource each? I mean, it's not a, the current context is a downer, and it does no good to deny that. So I just appreciate you for bringing that front and center.
I appreciate you too. Yeah. And I told you before, like whenever I collaborate with someone, of course I look at the synastry, and I looked at both of our charts and I'm like, oh my God, we're like really intense here. But if if you have a taste for that sort of thing, this is for you. And also, if you do have a tarot practice or an astrology practice, I think this is the best way to deepen and learn. It's not, I don't think it's going to be by giving you a lot of technique and then showing you PowerPoint slides. Like you can read all of that in books, but to actually get your hands dirty, get in there and work with it, with the current transits that are happening. And I'm even asking people to bring their own natal charts, so then we can do this like macro micro, like lens shifting. um, and because of that process, I think you'll also learn a whole lot about the way you want to practice divination, tarot, astrology. And then we make things, and then we're gonna get creative and like, yeah, right, put it into action. And so I think that's a great way to learn. If you are more of a technician and you're like, I really want to learn some stuff, that will be in there as well. Um, I think that's, oh, we have a few spots open in one of our cohorts. and then maybe like 5 or 6 spots open in another cohort. And then we're you can join asynchronously. Is that right?
Yeah, asynchronously. So if we only have a limited number of spots for like people who can attend the live sessions, because that's really, everything you said about like this is not like a technique class. It's seeing how other people see. And that is so deep. I mean, studying tarot, studying astrology, see like, oh, okay, like that's a possibility. So, very that. So, we're keeping the cohorts, limited. And yeah, the Wednesday evening one is more than half full, the Sunday one is half full. And if you can't attend any of the sessions, but you want to receive the recordings, that's the attending asynchronously option. You're welcome to do that. Um, and we have a little application that you can fill out, about all of the things. But yeah, super excited.
Yeah, I think that's about, yeah, I think that covers it. And then we'll see what happens in each cohort. And each cohort will be different because there'll be different people in each one. So yeah, I'm super excited. And yeah, I'm gonna need it. And I remember exactly when we came up with this, and we were hanging out on your porch, and you said something so inspiring to me. You were talking about some new things you were doing, and you're like I just decide what I want and then it happens. And I'm like, I was like, yeah, no, that's good. Hey, you know what I want? I was like, I want to do a Decans workshop with you. And you were like, okay, let's do it. It's like, all right then, I guess we're gonna do that. So, and here it is. And it's happening. So I'm super excited. So I see this type of work that we're doing as it's a very Virgo practice, and we are embarking on Virgo season. And I'm a little all over the place because just I've come back to New York and I'm kind of still adjusting. I think Virgo season starts on August 22nd. I didn't write it down, but 21st, 22nd. Um, and let's get to talking about Virgo. So I'm gonna start by kind of rattling off some Virgo stats or whatever, keywords, phrases, and yeah, just let them wash over you. This will be new for some of you. It'll be, not new for others. So Virgo, it's a mutable earth sign ruled by Mercury. And some things that came to mind this morning when I was thinking about Virgo: practical organization, communication, and analysis, but always in the vein of practicality because it's an earth sign. Thinking about data and data points, sorting and editing. Its symbol is the virgin or the maiden at the harvest. And if you ever see any images, there's usually a young woman in a wheat field. Um, and she's harvesting these things, but she's also preparing them, and she's separating the wheat from the chaff. What is useful, what is not useful, what is essential and efficient, and what is just waste and filler and fluff. um yeah, Virgo can be a very exacting sign in that way. It symbolizes all manner of fixing, mending, repairing, the applied sciences and arts, applied being the operative word, as opposed to like abstract or theoretical work, something that can be put to use. Some other archetypes include the handyman, the medicine woman, healers, highly skilled technicians, operative words being skill and technique. It's like, how do we do this? How do we do it right? um, and stewards of the land, like bringing in the earth quality, the earth element. administrators, the kitchen witch, um, and and to bring in a little darkness, for those of you who are like fans of uh, crime films or mafia films, if you watch enough of these types of films, you may have noticed that at some point they always have to bring in a cleaner or a fixer. And that's like actually what they're called in the mafia. Like when a job goes bad and things are just like out of control and a mess, they call the cleaner and they come in and they clean that shit up, and they make sure that, all the evidence is hidden, no one's going to get caught, everyone has their alibis. They create a situation of order. And what else comes to mind archetypally for Virgo? The hermit. So we're thinking of things that are hermetically sealed, hermeticism. And then I ended with the hermit because I'm going to hand it off to you, Shea. So how does Virgo show up in the tarot?
First of all, the fixer as a Virgo archetype, I'm dying. That's so good. It's so true. It's like you have to envision every possible way that something I love it. That's so dark. So yeah, the Virgo corresponds to the Hermit, Major Arcana 9. Um, and in this sort of mutable earth situation with the Hermit, we can think about the Hermit comes in the Fool's journey at the point where we begin to turn inward. And so the Hermit is becoming a sort of student, a rigorous student of their experience. Like, what is actually happening in here? Slowing down, like you can think about meditation, like slowing down the frames of our experience in order to see what's real, to see what's there. And Mercury also corresponds with the magician. And so I do see a relationship there as well in terms of like, as a someone in one of my cohorts said recently about the magician, like we have tools and we have choices, so the hermit does that close examination, that communing with experience, and the magician can then like do something about it. Really interestingly, I think in the minor arcana, Virgo shows up in the 8, 9, and 10 of Pentacles. And this is according to the decanic system of the Hermetic order of the Golden Dawn. And so when you were talking about like rigor, I've been thinking about the word excellence. The 8 of Pentacles is an arcana that is about craft, about honing our craft, about repetition and process as sort of the whole thing as opposed to the finished product. So being a student of process and technique and tools and materials, and also thinking. I think of it as the work practice card. Like our relationship with work is fucked up because of capitalism, but you can think about the 8 of Pentacles as like, how are we engaging in the fundamental activity of human life? Like, how is the 24 hours of the day a ritual, in the way that like other animals, like bees, have a thing that they do? And in fact, several images of the 8 of Pentacles show beehives as a sort of, there's a meticulous dance that happens around, or a spider in its web. That's another common, so those are, making honey and making webs are like fundamental activities of those creatures' lives. And the 8 of Pentacles sort of invites us to consider like, what is the fundamental activity of our life?
Mm.
And that gets collapsed into like wage labor. But what is our work? What is our sort of calling? How is sort of the ordinary activity of every day something worth mastering or becoming rigorously attuned to? So that's one way to think about Virgo. The 9 of Pentacles is Venus in Virgo. So if the Empress and the Hermit had a baby, it would be the 9 of Pentacles. And Venus in Virgo is again that like meticulous, rigorous self discipline that results in a sense of security. Like oneself as a secure base, becoming trustworthy to oneself because of all of the work that one has like put in. And also like making the beautiful, like with an eye to detail. My bestie has Venus in Virgo, and seeing her pack a car for a camping trip is just like, oh my God. um, and then the last is the 10 of Pentacles, which is Mercury in Virgo. So Mercury in its house, basically. And so we can think about the excellence and rigor of inheritance and legacy. How will people talk about us after we're gone? What are we doing to make that so? And the 10 of coins sort of invites us to take that rigor that we've been practicing ourselves and bring it into our community and into our people. So when I think of Virgo, I think about like, and I think you're going to talk about this, you know, these very kind of stereotypes about Virgo, but I think Virgo at its best is a sense of excellence and rigor, joyful rigor and discipline that's about doing what we most value and want to do, like the discipline to do that. You know, I think we think about discipline as like doing what we don't want to do, but there are things that we do want to do. And how are we being rigorous and excellent, which is not the same as perfectionistic, you know? And so yeah, that's what I'm really thinking about with Virgo is a sense of excellence, joyful rigor, and discipline.
And I'm so glad you brought in discipline, because I have a little thing here I wanted to read about discipline because that is another Virgo type of thing. And I have an internet crush. Um, his name is Brett O'Shea, and he's one of the,
Me too. Oh my God.
you know,
Let's
Brett
talk about it
O'Shea?
later. Yes.
Oh my God. His crush. He's so fucking awesome. And I want to read something that he wrote about discipline, which is so I'm so glad you brought that word in. And here it is. Discipline is freedom. To be undisciplined means to be dominated by the petulant whims of impulsivity, shifting moods, unreliable motivation, and moment to moment desires. It's to fail the marshmallow test as an adult. Discipline is a way of consciously choosing what your deepest values are and how you can live your day to day life in a way that aligns with those values, pursuing a greater good than momentary comfort or convenience. Discipline steps in when motivation inevitably falters. It sets aside the haggling, lazy, and endless negotiating of the comfort seeking mind and replaces it with a habitual and stoic pattern that isn't up for internal debate. Discipline is not an inborn trait for most. It's a skill set that is cultivated over time. It's a conscious decision we can all make. Like everything worth pursuing and obtaining, it simply requires practice and consistency over time. Eventually, you will learn to love it and it ceases being a chore. Your resistance to it transforms into not being able or willing to live without it. And like I just read that this morning. He posted that this morning, and I was getting ready for this conversation. I was like, that's like the most Virgo thing. And is pretty much echoing a lot of what you said. But I wanted to share that because I just think he's awesome anyway. And it was just so
Yeah, I'm going to
Virgo.
need you to send that to me. That was amazing. I was also like, I wonder what his chart's like that he like would say something like that. You know, because I'm very Saturnian, so give me a, you know, I like that, but it's hard. I like that he says it's a practice. You have to actually practice it.
And that's Virgo. If we look across the way at Pisces, you know, Pisces is the inspiration and the muse and the like maybe even some inborn talent. But then when we like none of that can be utilized in any real way until you develop skills, technique, and you practice. It's like doing your Like if you play the piano, you do your scales, you practice, and then Pisces would be like the symphony that you create once those foundational skills are set. But yeah, I thought that was great. I didn't know you liked Brett O'Shea too. I
Such a fan, such a fan.
Yeah, he's just brilliant. Yeah, and if you're wondering like who that is, how I know of him is he's part of the team that does Revolutionary Left Radio, and like their episodes are just fire. So good. Okay. Um, and so I just you kind of fleshed out amazingly all the things that I didn't in that first part of Virgo. Like that, those are like some big Virgo nuggets right there. Um, and yeah, once we come into Virgo season, we're starting to lose light. We're heading towards the fall equinox. And in ancient astrology, when we start to lose light, that also translates into things landing on the ground. The more light we have, the more, filled we are with the daimon and the ideal and the spirit. And then as we lose light, things become more embodied, and Virgo is the very start of that. um, but speaking to where we are now, which is like late summer, we're in this chaotic environment, and some would say, I would definitely say, a sick and unhealthy environment. If our earth is sick and we are of the earth and expressions of it, we are not well. I'm Unfortunately, like my consultations were ramping up after they were in a lull, and people are having a hard time physically, emotionally, mentally, with the systems that are in place because they're not healthy, they're not well. And we want Virgo to come in and help us like remove all, like taking the wheat from the chaff, remove all of the barriers to health and nourishment. It's not about adding more things usually, it's about taking away all the crap, which Virgo does really well. Anything that's unnecessary, that's getting in the way of optimal functioning. In activist circles, something I'm hearing a lot of as people are confused as to where to put their energy, this phrase comes up a lot. It's like, look for the helpers. And I think that's very Virgo, because it's about looking for the people that are doing things that are directly helping people. So this is not the ideological, the performance, or even the political work necessary. But who's doing something immediately useful? Who's delivering food to people who are hungry? Who's helping people find shelter who are unhoused? Who's holding space for people to heal from mental, emotional, physical injury? And who are the people teaching others useful skills? Who are the people fixing machines, cars, computers, repairing houses? Um, so I know a lot of people who are like, do I volunteer? Do I vote? Do I call my congressman? What am I supposed to do? And like for I think we're in a crisis. For the crisis that we're in, if you're doing your Virgo, I would look around. There are tons of organizations that are getting people in crisis the things they need right now, because our systems are crumbling, and there's there's too much shit, bureaucratic shit in the way on purpose for people who need things to be able to just get the things. Like we are so fucked up in that whole, it's not even organization. So I wanted to speak to that. And then I also wanted to speak to Virgo in pop astrology. when we're doing this very prescriptive thing with astrology. It's like, oh, Virgo, you're uptight. And so some ways Virgo gets a bad rap that might sound familiar. They're uptight, anal, persnickety, perfectionistic, which you beautifully talked about, overly critical, too self-sacrificing, fussy, a tendency to play the martyr, as in, look at all these things I've done for you that you didn't even ask for. Where's my, like getting a lot of your self-value from taking yourself out of the equation and like completely devoting yourself to something or someone else. But like devotion isn't bad. It's that sacrificial quality, like total sacrificial quality. But also, as you know, you have an incredibly well developed or a lot of experience with a deep spiritual practice. That's not always bad either, right? Like to kind of relinquish the egoic and be of total devotion and service to something else, something bigger, something greater. Um, yeah, that's where it gets tricky with both Virgo and Pisces. It's like so beautiful to have that kind of devotion towards anything. And at the same time, it could very easily turn into some kind of, martyr type of situation, which isn't always bad either. Um, it depends on what you're trying to what you're trying to do. Do you have anything to say about the whole martyr self-sacrificial thing?
Yeah, I do. It's so interesting. Like when you were talking about when people are kind of like, I don't know what I should do. Should I do this or should I do that? And you gave some great, examples of things people can do that are very like practical, and also thinking about Virgo on the level of like, if something were to happen to you and you were to become incapacitated, do the people in your life know where to look for? Have you made instructions for the people who love you about who to call and what to do? If you know what I mean? Like we think a lot of this is the martyr things. Like, let me do this like big this thing for these people over there, right? And like that needs to happen. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm also just saying though, is like in my experience of taking care of people who are ill and dying, is that like it's a lot of fucking work when someone hasn't done that practical, rigorous, you know, planning that, like, what happens if there's a flood in my community? What are the supplies I need? Who are the neighbors who need to be checked? You know what I mean? It's very there's a rigor about like very close to home. And it doesn't mean you have to like your neighbors, but you should be on a hello basis. It's like that level of, I think it's easy to idealize and be a martyr about things that actually won't help your people and your loved ones like in a moment of shakeup. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yes, totally. And that's when I think Virgo and Pisces go bad. When they can, or it can be about, yeah, actually trying to build an identity around how much you give up. And actually, just because you give up a lot of things doesn't mean you're actually helping all the time.
Yeah, like
So,
you serve people better with the impeccability of your own practice than you do with any sort of like grand gesture. I mean, really, a grand gesture does not create any lasting change, but like small, iterative, practical, rigorous attention to detail, over time can like totally change the direction of your life. So, yeah, I just appreciate like how you keep bringing it back to like the practical and this sort of oscillation between the Virgo and Pisces thing.
yeah, because that's going to really come up. I think it's September 17th when we head into Virgo season. We have a like a tsunami of a Pisces lunar eclipse in the middle of September. Yeah. And speaking of Pisces, I always like to bring in the axis because it's never just about, one side of the axis in isolation. So if we're talking about Virgo, we have to talk a little bit at least about Pisces. And the way I see that axis, I often call it the axis of perfection. They're actually both trying to be perfect, and they're doing it in two different ways. In Virgo, we have, again, with this editing type of a thing, where we're taking away things so we can have something so essential and so perfect, taking away all the flaws, everything that's wrong. And in Pisces, it's more about perfection as being whole, like a perfect circle or holistic. It's Pisces is like, no, we're not going to get rid of everything. We're going to let everything in. And that's perfection when we include everything. And so they're both, archetypally, they're both about healing and devotion and service and these types of things. And even some like toxicity, purity types of things, but the way they go about it is different. And I'm not going to talk anymore about the whole perfectionistic thing about Virgo because you totally nailed it. It's about excellence, which is different than perfection, and how we've come to know perfection if we're putting it in terms of our cultural understanding of perfection. It's also the axis of art, I think. And I already gave that example of there's the skill and the craftsmanship and the practice and the technique. And then there's the inspiration and the the place that art can take you, which is into the, realms of the sublime. But you can't get there. You can't make the thing unless you know what you're doing. You have to have some kind of skill. And also axis of illness, wellness. There's a lot of this like holistic healing type of thing, and also very precise medicine and science, but they're both trying to do the same thing. And the effort and the sublime. I think a lot about. I think we've all seen this image. It's the image of the ballet dancer's feet. Like we see the Pisces, we see this like beautiful, intoxicating ballet performance. Everything is so pretty and white. And then you take the ballet dancer's shoes off, and it's just calluses and blood and scars, and it's pretty ugly. But from all that practice and the like strength at the bottom and all of this beautiful delicacy on top, sort of like when we see a duck or a swan like gliding across the lake, it looks so effortless and beautiful. But if you were to look underneath, there's the Virgo, right? They're like pedaling their little butts off. And so that's just another image I think of when I think of the Virgo Pisces axis. And one more thing, Pisces, it's everywhere and nowhere. It's the ubiquity. And Virgo is, it's right here. It's exact. It's precise. And then how those two inform each other. One more quote from Jessica Wildfire, who is another internet crush. And I just read this morning too, and I'm like, oh, that's Virgo Pisces. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And Virgo, it's like, show me the data, show me the facts. What happens when that is imperfect? Our whole idea of what is present and what is not present is also imperfect. So, and like this goes back to the bypassing. Just because we pretend like we don't know what's going on doesn't actually mean that it's not going on. And so I thought that was interesting. Um, and then finally, on a personal note, and you may have answered this already, and if you have, you don't have to. Like, what is your personal relationship to Virgo?
Wow. Um, I love that question. What is my personal relationship with Virgo? Well, um, I guess I would think about it in terms of my relationship with the hermit, you know. Um, I was also thinking about, as you were talking about the axis, and I love that. I love how you broke that down. Just thinking about the axis in tarot is the hermit and the moon. Like the moon is the arcana that corresponds with Pisces. You would think the moon, but it's not, it's Pisces. So the hermit and the moon are numerologically related. 9 and 18, 1 plus 8 is 9. So they have a relationship with each other that way. And, the hermit is like illuminating something, and the moon is very much about like confusion and mystery and the darkness and the unconscious, so that axis of like trying to see something and like everything is illuminated. That I just, I don't know, I've never thought about that before. My relationship with the hermit, I mean, when I lived at the monastery, I did hermitage every year, which is like going into a small wooden hut with no electricity and no running water and no timepiece and no reading material, and doing your practice and communing with the land. And so I feel like my relationship with the hermit and Virgo in that sense is like very deep. Like I think I've had an experience of um, the hermit archetype and hermiting that isn't very common, you know. So yeah. And in terms of like when I just look at the 8, 9, and 10 of Pentacles, it's like I do think that like the magic is in the material realm. Like Pisces is an amazing feeling, but like the daily experience of like the magical nature of life is to be found in the earth suit, in the pentacles, in time and material, and how you use those things, and what you literally do with your body, your behavior. Like those are the things that actually create the magic. I mean, that feeling that you talk about, that oceanic feeling, comes and goes. But Virgo is the part that's like, I'm going to create conducive conditions every day to have that oceanic experience, recognize it when it comes, and like fully experience it and like make the beautiful with it. That's how I sort of think. I really think there's so much magic in practice.
Mhm. And so, um, you texted me a few days ago. You texted me a funny text. Um, and I'm like, I'm gonna go peep your chart. Um, and so I have a recent image of your chart in my head, and your Virgo stuff is in your third house of the day to day, the routine, the things that you're surrounded with every single day. Yeah, the makeup of your daily life. And so as you were speaking, you were speaking your third house, Virgo.
I love that. Like, I'm devoted to third house matters. I am devoted to like this little corner of my world and the people in it and like the 24 hours of the day to day. That makes a lot of sense.
So that was beautiful. And and yeah, I just wanted to share in case anyone out there is like me, my relationship to Virgo is so poor. I I read this beautiful thing about discipline from Brett O'Shea. Like that is something Virgo is so foreign to me. And like I've talked to you that I'm going through some restructuring because there is no structure. I don't take care of things. I'm almost like anti habitual. And it's been a big struggle. Be like, and he mentioned, if we don't have discipline, we're just slaves to impulsivity. And so I'm like, yeah, that's me. Like I have a ton of, Aries planets, and I I tend to want to just be in the moment, but all the time, and behave according to instinct. Like I have a lot of trust in my instincts, but the idea of, like I've never been great with ritual or schedule or routine, and I intellectually understand the value of it. Um, and it's something I think I'm going to have to work on forever, because I also don't think that's one of my jobs to do. I think my job is to start a lot of fires and get a lot of things going. And but I'm exploring being a fully fleshed out human being. And I'm learning from a lot of like Virgo people and Capricorn people like yourself, like how to do that. And I think, one of the things that's happened, my experience of Virgo is I'm surrounded by Virgos. I collaborate with so many Virgo risings, Virgo suns, and like I come in with all this energy and force and ideas and activity, and I think I give them something to do. And what they end up doing is they end up structuring just like all of this stuff, all of this content that I have. Like that's easy for me. I have a shit ton of energy. I can do 10 things at one time all day. It doesn't bother me. But then when people say, "Oh, can you pull up the files for the thing you did 6 months ago?" I'm like, "What are you talking? Like, I don't know where that is." I don't like, and coming back to our workshop, like when we started this, I'm like, "Okay, I have this idea. Like, we could do this, 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 and this." And you're like, "Okay," and you already had a system. And like within 2 hours, you were like, "Hey, Cory, look at this." And there were sign up sheets and registrations and Excel spreadsheets. And I was like, "Oh my God." And so I have those people in my life. And so if you are, Virgo rich or Virgo poor, um, it doesn't it doesn't matter. You have Virgo somewhere in your makeup. We all have all the things, and they're just arranged differently. And so I'm just so grateful to be experiencing Virgo by collaboration and relationship. And if you are, Virgo poor, you don't have to beat yourself up. It's like, "Oh my God, I'm not disciplined and I don't do things, I haven't set up these systems for myself." You might have some other type of relationship with Virgo. So I just wanted to and if you're like really good at Virgo, just also know that can be overdone. So it's all about, integrating and finding how all of these qualities come together in really beautiful and interesting ways.
I
Yeah.
love that. Can I just say, because I'm so glad that you said this about like, sort of coming out as like not having a lot of Virgo, stuff. And yeah, I don't want to suggest by like the way I talk about practice that like everyone should do it like that. Like everyone should do a hermitage every year. I do think that like, the invitation to excellence or rigor or discipline that Virgo invites us into, it's a much more interesting question to ask, what would that look like for me or for another person, right? Like it's not going to be spreadsheets and sign up forms for everyone. And it's like how to kind of, you use the word when I sent you that text message in distress, you gave me some advice. You wrote back and you were like, be impeccable with yourself. And impeccable is such a Virgo word. And it was really helpful because I took it to mean like, how do we be impeccably ourselves? Right? So that for me means I am with this transit, I'm angry on a good day. I'm incandescently enraged about a million things. So during this astrology, like it's going to be bad. Like, so being impeccable doesn't mean not being angry. It means how to protect myself and others from the effects of like my internal inflammatory responses. So, yeah, it's not about like becoming a Virgo or becoming something that you're not. It's about like I think it's a really interesting question to ask ourselves like what is our relationship to rigor and discipline, like what comes up for us when we hear that, and like what would it look like for me to invite that energy into who I am and the life I actually have without thinking I'm going to become a different person.
Beautifully, beautifully put. Um, and I think maybe final thing, who knows? I want to speak to, we talked about some of the bad rap that Virgo gets as being this fussy, virginal, uptight, anal human being. A friend of mine, an astrologer, Nate Spear, who who I've had him on the show a bunch of times. Love talking to him. Every time we get on the topic of Virgo, he has his little phrase for it. He's like, no, he's like, Virgo is dirt charisma. And yeah, I love that because, it's like also a lot of people I know who have a lot of Virgo, they're like, man, my sign's the boring sign. Because it's day to day and it's hard work and discipline and things like that. And they're like, man, my and it's not sexy and it's the virgin. But when Virgo's working really well, like Virgo gets its hands dirty. It's doing something. And these Virgo people that I have around me, let me tell you, there's nothing sexier than someone saying, I'll do that for you. I'll get that for you. And it's like, oh, okay. Like even like Shay, when like honestly, when you like had all the administrative stuff up like that, I was like, oh my God. I love you. It was like
That's how I can express my care and love for people is like let me get your shit organized.
that. It's That's amazing. And I've had like Virgo core cohorts, and we've talked about sex and things like that, and they're like, yeah, why is Virgo the virgin? Like, I'm sexy, god damn it. And it's like, yeah, you the 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 sexiness, like both like literally and metaphorically, is the the attention to detail, anticipating needs. Like, hello, that's really hot. um
And also,
so
Virgin, before it became co-opted under patriarchy, it a virgin was a woman who belonged to herself. So she didn't have a husband and
mhm.
she was a woman who was like, it comes from the same root as virile, actually, but patriarchy. So yeah, I mean, having ducks in a row to me is very sexy.
um yeah, sorry, just my email barged in. um yeah, it's okay, I lost my train of thought, but it's yeah, it's that considered thought, devotion, and attention. It's important to do well by somebody, to do right. um and so for anyone who has like any kind of judgment or issue about their Virgo placements, it's like its own, and then to quote Nate Spear, it's its own dirt charisma. It's there's something like very, very yummy about it. If you dig a little deeper. Oh, that's where I was going. You mentioned um, the Virgin. Part of Virgo is also the archetype of the Vestal Virgins, right? They belonged to no man, they didn't marry, and the ones that were selected to be the Vestal Virgins and the keeper of the hearth, they were chosen because they were the most skilled, the most intelligent. They were the ones who they were the only women who were allowed to sit, I believe, in like council and participate in politics. And they did have sex. They just did not. They weren't owned by a man. When they did have sex with someone, it was a usually like a some kind of sacred rite, and they chose who they would have relations with, but mostly they were devoted to themselves, and the powers that be did not want them to be like in the family way because they were supposed to take that time and energy and develop their skills and talents. Like, so these were also the major artists of the time, and they were given that space to cultivate their art and their skills. And so, yeah, there's that. Yeah, virgin not as not sexual, but virgin as like self-contained. Beautiful. I think we covered a lot. Do you have anything to add about this Virgo subject?
Oh my God, this was so fun. No, I feel very complete.
So, well, then I'm just going to thank you. Thank you so much. I love all your insights, and I'm so looking forward to doing this with you.
I know it's going to be great.
I think it's going to be great. And if you would like to register, there will be a link to that in the show notes. Um, and of course, I know most of you listen via streaming platforms, and you can hear this on all the streaming platforms. That info should be there as well. And yeah, I think I'm going to take a break. And then when I come back, I'm going to do a quick September/Virgo season forecast and talk a bit about this eclipse that's coming up. So I will set you free, Shay. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm going to take a break now. Be back in a second. Hey, everybody. I'm back after bidding Shay farewell. I loved that conversation. I feel fully Virgoed out. I feel solid, that was a solid delineation and deep dive into Virgo. And so it's time for the forecast for Virgo season/September. You can get this in Chronogram magazine every month, Chronogram online and in print. And this is my very short forecast, but I think it's good enough so you just get a feel for that tonal shift that I was talking about earlier in the show. Um, so here we go. I wrote this thing called the deep end, and here it is. In September, we come to the precipice of a steep drop in the swimming pool. Despite all of the surprises and noise of summer, we've been able to feel the ground beneath our feet, at least, right? Even if it was quaking. As we continue to take steps forward with our toenails grazing the bottom, the floor disappears and we're forced to swim. We're in the deep end. So I'm sure most of us have had this experience either in a swimming pool or in a lake. You're walking in, feels pretty comfortable, feels good. And then you can feel as the water rises, you're going to have to take a different tack to be able to keep moving. So when the floor goes away, we're going to have to swim. Different element um, that we're working with as we come into Virgo season and September. Um, we're in the deep end of the pool. Even though Mercury finally comes home to practical Virgo on the 9th, and the sun moves into equitable Libra on the 22nd, and that's our fall equinox, it's no match for the churning emotionality of September's water sign placements. First, Mars enters Cancer on the 4th for a prolonged amount of time due to an upcoming retrograde. Our emotional sensitivities will be activated around topics of safety, tribal identity, and comforts of the past. On the 17th, eclipse season begins with a lunar eclipse in Pisces. Its proximity to Neptune in Pisces suggests tidal waves of empathy, but also deep yearnings for escape and all forms of anesthetics. Finally, Venus enters Scorpio on the 22nd. We may develop a taste for the extreme or forbidden when it comes to relationships, beauty, and pleasure. With all three water signs in play, objectivity is not our strong suit, and half measures will feel very unsatisfying. So, yeah, extreme is the name of the game. Hard to find that middle space. It's going to be very tempting to all or nothing things. And I would suggest that unless you really need to, if you've been sitting on something for a long time and something needs to go one way or the other, like I think that needs to be let out. But, we were just kind of talking about impulsivity and discipline. Anything you could do to give yourself a little bit of space and pause when a big emotion just kind of like comes up and smacks you upside the head and giving you the feeling that you need to react and do something very extreme. If you can pause and look for some facts, again, try to get some objectivity when we're in our feelings. It's personal, it's subjective, and we forget that we're viewing events through a lens, and that lens may distort. This is all intensified by Pluto's final return to Capricorn. It only visits for a couple of months before heading back to Aquarius, but it marks the end of a process that was started in 2008. Pluto, symbol of subterranean power and the corrosive force that is necessary for regeneration, also finalizes America's Pluto return. So a planetary return occurs when a planet comes back to the place it occupied at an entity's inception. So like when we have a solar return, like that's our birthday, that's where the sun was when we were born. Saturn return, that's that 29 and a half year cycle. Entities like nation states, also everything can be charted. And so there's a couple charts floating around for the United States of America. I've been looking at the Sibley chart. And in that chart, we've been in the Pluto return zone for a couple of years now. And when Pluto goes back into Capricorn, it's back in that Pluto return zone. And then that's it. That's final. That's the end of Pluto's work in Capricorn. And I think we're really feeling that. I think we're seeing that everywhere we look. And it marks the end of a 248-year cycle for the nation. Do with that what you will. And then I also want to read, I'm writing evergreen astrology articles for Chronogram every month to kind of flesh out this shorter forecast. And one of the major things that happens in September/Virgo season is we get a lunar eclipse in Pisces. And so I'm gonna read about that. And this is, I'm writing about eclipses in kind of an educational type of way. So if you're a little fuzzy on like what's the big deal about eclipses, um, I'm about to read something. So um, here we go. So this is understanding eclipses part one. Because remember, when we have eclipse season, it's usually two eclipses that we're looking at. And we're going to look at this month's lunar eclipse in Pisces. Eclipse season is here. It's time for a cosmic reset. In astrology, eclipses symbolize a time when human will and its relationship to the natural environment get synced up. We get to adjust our behavior and our actions to the conditions of a specific quality of time. Astrological timing occurs in cycles, and eclipses represent a master clock, if you will, that delineates the cyclic relationship between the sun and the moon. The sun indicates our life force and the ideals, inspirations, and fuel we need to embody a purpose. The moon describes the instincts, emotional nature, and nervous system conditioning inherited from our childhood environment and ancestors. The moon is felt in the body and oftentimes gets rationalized by the sun. And so when you see like the the moon and sun together and how they're working together, describe kind of our whole experience of reality. It's the information that we're getting in our body, and then the story or the lens that the sun then filters that through. And okay, when they come together in a solar eclipse, which is a new moon, or a lunar eclipse, which is a full moon, much gets revealed about how our ideals manifest on the material plane. Here on the ground, we might experience eclipses, they usually come in sets of two, as a time of erratic energy, high emotionality, and sudden changes. There's a fever pitch quality to them. They tend to usher in make or break situations and times of crisis. They are particularly good at fast tracking changes that we've been sluggish in implementing. For example, if we've been overly cautious about making a move that would be good for us, an eclipse will give us a big push forward so that we're in sync with the cosmic clock. On the other hand, if we've been heading down a path that is at odds with our nature or trying to execute something that is ill-timed, an eclipse will derail us. And then we'll bitch and moan about that, but actually, you know, that divine timing might be saving our asses. So something to think about before you like curse having, certain plans ruined or whatever. Nature speaks loudly during eclipses, which is one of the reasons that intention setting and other manifestation ceremonies are not encouraged at this time. It's a time to listen and observe. There's a cyclic momentum and natural intelligence that is bigger and more powerful than human will and perception. Astronomically, and this one, I am getting into some technical things here. If it helps you, you can close your eyes and try to imagine this. If it's still hard to imagine, there are tons of illustrations online if you're trying to get a picture. So getting into the weeds a little bit here. Um, Astronomically, eclipses occur when a lunation is in close proximity to the lunar nodes. The lunar nodes are 2 points, north and south, where the moon's orbital path crosses the ecliptic. And the ecliptic is the orbital plane that the Earth makes around the sun. A solar eclipse occurs when the moon passes between the Earth and the sun, and a lunar eclipse occurs when the moon moves into the Earth's shadow. The upcoming lunar eclipse on the 17th of September happens at the moon's north node. Astrologically, the north node symbolizes areas of life that crave growth and exploration. It also indicates qualities and new ideas that we might become enamored or even obsessed with. So here's speaking to that, some of that intensity of the eclipses. And so that's adding to, right, these water sign placements that we have. There's a feeling in the body that something needs to happen, and I need to go to extremes to be able to do a certain thing or accomplish a certain thing, which may or may not be true. So yeah, with eclipses, we can get a little obsessive. North node is really the obsessions that like pull us forward into new territory. This particular eclipse is complex because the North Node is currently in Aries, even though the lunation is in Pisces. And that marks a shift in the current series of eclipses. For the past year, we've been having eclipses on the Aries Libra axis. And this month, we will experience a point of transition to the next series, which is on the Virgo Pisces axis. Each series lasts approximately 18 months. We still have more Aries Libra eclipses coming up, but we can think of this one that happens in September as a preview for the next series. So kind of it's like when you watch a movie trailer and you're like, here are some scenes from the actual film that that you may or may not be watching later. It's a teaser. Um, Topics will be introduced, but they're, whatever happens is not the whole story. Nothing in astrology, when we talk about, these transits, event wise, it's like, oh, we're having this transit. This, symbolizes a certain event. It doesn't stop there. These are not like isolated experiences. When we're working with astrology, we're working with an unfolding of a whole story. These are like data points, plot points, and whatever happens, the actual event, the discrete event ripples out. Things unfold and keep unfolding. And so this is an introduction. Did I say that already? Yes. Okay, so it's a preview. Lunar eclipses are often characterized as full moons on steroids. We receive the illumination and culmination of feeling that's typical at a full moon, but with the added consequences and emotional excitement of being aligned with the nodes. Full moons also symbolize points of release. This can look like major endings and beginnings for areas of life represented by the signs involved. And also, if you're doing natal chart astrology, by the houses involved, by the transits involved. But we're speaking broadly about an eclipse event. So this upcoming Pisces eclipse points to topics on the spectrum of toxicity and purity, isolation and union, and the material and the sublime. And Shea and I talked a little bit about those axes. It also activates the dominant signature of 2025, which is Neptune's co-presence with Saturn in Pisces and their upcoming conjunction in 2026, which is that is a huge, huge, huge conjunction. We are in the prelude to that. You're gonna hear a lot about that over the next year, that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. We're being introduced to ever-intensifying confusion over the nature of reality, illusion, and what happens when you blur the lines between the two. We could experiment with integrating fantasy and fact to create something completely different. This eclipse's proximity to Neptune also symbolizes significant events related to bodies of water and the rules and regulations that are or are not working to ensure their health and safety. Health and safety, a little bit of a nod to Virgo at the other end of the spectrum. As Pisces represents the ubiquitous, we're also likely to learn more about what it means to be viral in terms of pathogens in our air and water, information and misinformation, and cultural trends. How do things spread? How do things become virulent? Pisces is also the sign of compassion, anesthetics, convalescence, and transcendence. It might be a time to look for the medicine in the poison and the healing in the pain, which that's a nod to, again, that axis. There isn't, wellness and sickness, healing and pain. They are products of each other, and they are also processes of each other. They are two sides of a whole experience. And so I think, like every fucking month this year, it's going to be really, really interesting. And so there's a little lens on September, and I hope you all are hanging in there and maybe even doing really well. And I just want to encourage, if our Getting Through It workshop sounds like something you might need or just enjoy, I don't think it's going to be a bummer. I think it's going to be fun, actually. The information for that should be in the show notes. And I will leave you with that, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.